Welcome back, Ag-tastic listeners, to another episode of the Ag-celerate with Cropin video podcast series, where we continue to dive into topics that are at the core of how the agriculture industry can thoughtfully accelerate digital transformation as we focus on delivering impact today and building for the future. My name is Sujit Janardhanan, and I lead marketing at Cropin. Now, the agriculture sector is at the cusp of managing a disruptive practice shift due to the technological advancements that are available today. Also, the demand for improving overall production and strict climate smart agriculture practice adoption and sourcing regulations, the use of digital technologies to better manage agronomic risk, food waste, price uncertainty is becoming inevitable. As digital adoption accelerate, organizations in the industry too will have to shift gears in their entire business transformation process. And we clearly see this happening today. But it's worth pondering over some fundamental questions before starting this journey. Or probably if you are midway through this journey, and what are some of the things that you probably need to look closely at? When is a business ready for digital led transformation? If yes, do you have the best options available? How should you structure your digital transformation journey? How do you measure success in this case? Does this transformation benefit every aspect, every business stakeholder, every user? Well, these are a few of the questions that we will try and answer in today's episode. And to share their experience and expertise with us, we have Jeremy Grutke, who heads the computational agronomy for the Syngenta group with us today. Jeremy is an expert in building and launching new platforms across diverse agriculture customer segments, who is also the chair at the UNL Agronomy and Horticulture Alumni Advisory Council at the University of Nebraska. Prior to joining Syngenta, he's worked with companies like Corteva and DuPont Pioneer. We also joined by Marco Brini, whom you already met in the last episode along with me. Marco is a digital agriculture expert with over 20 plus years of experience leveraging digital innovations to benefit the industry. He has worked with his teams to successfully develop and bring to market several new technologies and products in the fields of environmental monitoring, risk mitigation, and digital agriculture. Welcome, Jeremy and Marco. Super glad to have you join us in this podcast series.
Hello, thank you.
Yep, great to be here.
Awesome. And let's dive straight in. And Marco, I'll probably start with you, since you probably bring in a more outside-in view when you're looking at digital transformation projects. From your experience in working as a consultant in the digital agriculture space with organizations in the agriculture value chain, what are some of the key factors that you believe organizations should really consider when they are planning and even executing through a large-scale digital transformation program? I'm specifically highlighting the keyword here, large scale, and this is critical because we've been witness to a lot of digital transformation programs either being in silos or as pilots or at the fringes and not at the core transforming overall businesses. We're just starting early green shoots of that truly happening. So would love to see and hear from you on what has been your experience of what are some of the key factors that probably organizations should consider when they are undertaking a large-scale digital transformation program.
Okay, yeah. The number one is changing your DNA as an organization, because in my opinion, this is a major change. The digitalization is not just having new tools that are helping to do the same thing over and over in a different, let's say, in a more efficient way. This is the end game, of course, in introducing efficiency, more sustainable food growing, but the way that things are done implies a radical change in the business model, in the mindset, in the competences. So let's say at 0 point really is looking into yourself and being ready to change your DNA, because otherwise if an organization would just look at that as another project that is throwing on the market and hopefully is going to be successful, even in case it's going to be successful, then is not going to get momentum. The core of the company should be aware that there is a deep understanding of what is happening and a deep commitment to move in that direction. And of course, when this is done, there are other minor, let's say, as important, but from a different perspective, how to do that. And then, of course, you need to have a clear vision and objective, execute binding and support of the management, change management in some cases, prioritization of initiatives. So being very clear on saying what's on top of the other, that selecting the best technologies, having a clear data strategy, dealing with the integration factor, performance measurement in terms of KPI is absolutely important. So, but these are management activities that management practices that you can plug into the project. To me, really, the point is having a sort of introspection at organization level and being aware that this is a deep change that is going to affect entirely this organization.
Thank you, Marco. And you made a bunch of interesting points there, right? I think vision, objectives, KPIs, what are you really trying to solve for? All of those pieces are super critical. And we also spoke about technologies, the data strategy piece. I think super critical, all those components. And I'm going to pick up each one of those as we keep navigating our conversation today. Jeremy, I wanted to bring a connected point across to you. Now, since you've been a leader driving both in terms of building the vision of some of these digital transformation programs and businesses that you've operated in, and then really driving those digital transformation programs to fruition, helping achieve those objectives and KPIs that have been defined. But I'm sure what we would want to start off with here was particularly the areas in terms of integrating new technologies with existing systems, and also managing the change in processes that it brings about. If you can touch upon those pieces, and we will bring forth some of the other points that Marco also brought about in the latter half of this conversation. But what's been your experience, especially in how do we manage the integration of new technologies with existing systems which have been built over the years and processes that have been built over the years and have been practiced, and you need to bring about changes there?
Yeah, no, Marco brings up some good points. I'll probably be a little bit on the other side, not completely, but the radical change of an the corporate DNA and the agricultural DNA of how we operate and do business. I think that's where we maybe end up challenging almost too much the history of ag, because ag at the end of the day around the world is a very relationship based business model. Retail and direct route to markets in multiple countries around the world. And that's just kind of the way ag is. It's a relationship based system. And over the years, as we've tried to launch, I wouldn't call them radical new business models, but different approaches to that traditional business model, we've had success and failures. And so as an example, I'd say a relative failure or lack of success is a lot of the traditional software SaaS models. I think you see a lot of companies around the world moving away from a pure SaaS model in the ag tech space, both the large ag companies like Syngenta, as well as even the startups are struggling with some of those SaaS-based business models. And where we've seen success is we augment digital with the traditional business model. And so, in our organization here at Syngenta Group, we call that a product plus component. And so what the product is their traditional seeds and crop protection inputs. The plus is the digital component then that goes with those products. And really that helps, bring together the both in the digital transformation for the organization, because, frankly, groups and individuals that use digital will replace the groups that don't, and individuals that don't. And so I think this debate that digital is going to replace humans, I hope people have moved past that, because it's the humans that use digital that will replace the humans that don't, right? And move up the ladder and provide value to customers and growers and channel partners around the world. So I don't know if we're going to radically change the business model. I think we're going to augment the traditional business model and the relationship models of agriculture out there. And so, that's where we've seen success. I've seen success. And I think where I've also seen lack of success. Now, don't get me wrong, there are startups in the ag tech that, as an individual company, have success with a SaaS model. But if you look under the hood, it's really a service business with a human working with the grower. And I would question if it's a true SaaS model. It's a service model at the end of the day.
Plus one to that, Jeremy, and I completely agree. Considering the fact that it's such a people-intensive industry, and the fact that it's been running for centuries in a certain way, and relationships are the core. Trying to disrupt that by saying that, hey, you need to change all of it is not going to be the approach. And I love the product plus strategy at Syngenta. Great point. And I'm going to touch upon the business model aspect that you called out. And I have a connecting anecdote based on a conversation that I just had a couple of weeks. And this was with the IT executive team of a crop protection company. And we were actually introducing Cropin to them. And once they understood our entire stack, they definitely got excited, and they brought in their managing director and CEO of their parent company into the meeting, who wasn't expected to join us. And after he got a glimpse of what technology could really do today in the crop protection and in general in the agriculture value chain, he made a very insightful and probably a little overwhelming, intimidating statement to the entire group there, including us. And the point was, the fundamental philosophy that we should operate with is not looking at using these kind of technologies like the ones that Cropin's built to augment or just improve or make incremental improvements in productivity, revenue, or improve operational efficiencies, etc., but to fundamentally rethink our business models, because these technologies weren't available to us in the past and now they are. So can we rethink how these business models can be built today? And he made a very I would say almost like an extreme statement saying, can I grow and build a business model that's built on selling less of crop protection products to my farmer communities instead of selling them more, wherein I get more farmers mind share and loyalty because they see us that we have their best interest in mind, and our intent is, can we help them cut pesticides and chemicals that they use as agri input in their farms? And I love that particular perspective. And the whole room got thinking as soon as that statement was made. So Jamie, I wanted to check, do you have any examples that you can share with the group here on how has some of the organizations that you've worked with benefited from rethinking either business processes or models while adoption of digital agriculture technologies? And are there any lessons that you can share with the audience here?
Yeah, no, I think the piece that you're bringing up there is a little bit of maybe the disruption on a larger business model, of just selling more and more and more on that piece. And that is truly going to change, right? And digital will change that piece. I think the classic use case of today is see and spray, or sense and act, I think as Deere would refer to it as. And so we've kind of done this in a sense already with variable rate fertility. If we go back, in the early 2000s when variable rate fertility took off in the US with grid soil samples and then applying the right nutrient at the right place. In that case, a lot of examples showed cost savings to say less lime or less potassium or phosphorus because you were applying in the right areas. But then you'd also find the use cases where on the total farm, you applied more because you had areas of the fields that were way underutilized compared to other areas that were way overutilized. I think here we see we're going to have to look at the total farm expense, right? That expense budget is going to stay pretty flat, but I think you're going to see input costs move around, right? If we save on herbicide application, we may take that money now and invest that into fertility or invest that into a fungicide application. Because what we want to do as an organization and a collective community is raise productivity. And at the end of the day, a grower around the world has a finite amount of cash and capital that they want to spend on input products. And so we're going to see a reallocation and shift, I think, as we move forward. We'll save in certain areas, maybe in crop protection applications from a herbicide, post-herbicide application, but we'll now reinvest that money as a grower and organization into areas that will grow productivity, right? And I see that as a good example of where we may disrupt a sector, but the whole input, we're going to grow yield, right? And that's what we want to do at the end of the day. So we may spend more money on a fungicide in parts of the world to protect a crop. We may put more into fertility now and less in weed control. And I see that piece as a total work going forward. So from a digital piece, we need to help growers make that decision on return on investment, right? How much probability, how much risk do you have of disease coming in? So that's where in computational agronomy, we look at like disease forecast and prediction as an example. Do you see a high risk of a disease coming into your area? Should you protect that with a fungicide? And so I think that's where you're going to see that product plus and that information come forward, is making sure now where do we go to maximize yield? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do to feed the growing population around the world.
I think a great point, as in maximizing yield is probably, and the ROI at the grower level. I think I love those 2 points that you called out, Jeremy. Marco, from your experience of working with organizations and trying to help them actually rethink their business model with digital agriculture technologies, right? And not just automating existing processes. Why do you think it is critical? And do you have any success stories, or even stories where you had learnings, both yourselves as well as yourself as well as the organization that you worked with, on what worked, what didn't, when we were trying to rethink business models?
Sure. Yeah, I've been addressing this. I was confronted with this situation when we were launching this project that was very large project backed by the Swiss government and done in conjunction with Nestle and Syngenta. It was 2012, 2013. And I remember having a conversation with the previous R&D manager in Syngenta in Basel. And I've been asking clearly, what are the reasons you are thinking to do this? Syngenta is selling this product, this chemical product. So if we find a way to minimize the use of this product, then you're going to sell less. So where is the benefit? And so he smiled at me and he said, the reason I made this question is that we were co-investing as a startup. So he smiled at me and said, well, if you're having this conversation with a salesman, a sales department, they will hate you. But you're talking with the future of the company. We are thinking about what is going to be tomorrow. So we are collecting information, and it's clear that we are going to transition to a different business model. It's clear that we want, like Jeremy said, at the end of the day, we want to serve the farmers. And serving the farmer means supporting them into optimizing the production, producing more with less. And if we can share, if we can find a business model that is going to help to achieve that, then we can take a portion of that. So instead of selling more, we were producing together better. And that was very convincing to me, to the point that we co-invested quite a large amount of financial resources and time in a very successful project. And as far as I've seen, there are several organizations that have a challenge. And the major challenge, I believe, has been taught to me by the former corporate director of Nestlé, Monsieur, which was a mentor to me, and always pushed me to think from a different perspective, to put myself in the shoes of the farmer. And in my opinion, this is the major challenge that most of the manager or CEO founders or employees of companies large and small are facing, because basically they see farmers as customers and not as partners. So I really love the position that Jeremy took, and your position as well, Sujit, that's the point. And when that was clear to me, if you change the perspective in seeing from that point of view, you will accommodate all the changes automatically into your organization. While doing the reverse, starting to make the reverse engineering, so making all small changes in order that you in the future could put yourself in the shoes of the farmer, doesn't really work very well. So to keep story short, this is the way I would recommend, and I've seen personally several companies that have been transitioning to this mindset be much more successful. So yeah, another thing that is very very well recommended, that is a good exercise that is helping to have this, to adopt this mindset, is building the business cases, and the business cases from the return on investment point of view. And here I'm also touching on what Jeremy said, completely on that. So basically, the farmer is making an investment of time and financial resources, and they want to have something out of it. And we want to have a paper. And so if a company is writing a paper when it's clear, so it's making the exercise, and at the end of the exercise, it's clear that there is a clear return on investment, and you have multiplied, you have several examples of this, then this is going to be successful because as we have been saying, and Jeremy suggested, it's a relationship. So it's mouth to mouth, even without a strong marketing, you would just sell it. That's my position, to keep story short.
Awesome, Marco. And I'm going to pick up a couple of the points that you just stated. While there is intent, there is vision, organizations operating in this space clearly are keeping the grower at the center and are looking at what the future holds as we all try to transition through some of the challenges. And digital technologies will play their part, but we all have to see how we manage this whole transition and disruption effectively. And I think this is where I had a question, Marco, first to you, and Jeremy, I'll come to you immediately after that. As in, do you have examples of some of the common pitfalls that organizations face while they're trying to drive and implement this change, both at the change management level in people behavior, processes? The second piece is you may have a vision and objective defined, but defining KPIs and measuring them during the various phases of the digital transformation program and project, and how can some of these pitfalls be avoided? And I wanted to also see if we can, and probably double click on KPIs, and Jeremy, I would love you also to probably take a stab at this one. And this is around KPIs, and this was based on a LinkedIn post that I just read over the weekend, and which is around how critical it is to define and monitor progress against KPIs defined for a particular digital transformation project. Whereas as I have been interacting with customers, the thing that's been crystal clear or really becoming clearer and clearer to me has been the fact that, you know what, yes, define KPIs, yes, monitor and track progress, and keep reporting back to the various stakeholders so they see the impact. But I also realize that your KPIs themselves may keep changing as the maturity of these projects or programs go through various phases. And how critical is that? And have you seen, and do you have examples of not just pitfalls, but also how some of these KPIs can actually change as we go through various phases of maturity of these transformation programs? Marco, over to you first,
Sure.
and Jeremy, I'll come to you. What's that?
Yeah, sure. The first KPI to keep in mind as the north in the compass is, as we said, is the return on investment on the farmer side. If the organization is an input provider or a tool provider, that should be the north. And keeping that always in mind. The other KPI will be sub KPI that should fine tune and adjust according to the development of the project, like you mentioned. If it's simply a first pilot, what you want to see is, of course, verifying the claiming of the technologies. The technology is claiming to do that. Let's check it out. Does it really works? Can stand the harsh condition of the agriculture sector? Is easy to use? Can be adopted? So among the KPI, if I have to flag this on the technology side, if it's a tool or software or hardware, whatever it is, then of course we want to have these flagged positively. And Then, of course, you have the adoption rate, and but that is on the later phase as scaling factor. You want that to be spread very fast, but still, I mean, of course, there are the usual management uh, recommendation, such as inadequate communication, resistance to change, unrealistic expectation, insufficient resources, poor project management can be there, ignoring the user needs, inadequate performance measurement. So you can have good KPI, but then not measured correctly. The point is really the essence. If you have decided really as an organization that you want to transition, you say, okay, this is going to be my future. Then you have adopted, let's say, a set of possible solution, or one or more solution that are good to be integrated. And I don't want to get into the detail of the integration, even though it's extremely important. As another point is also the data ownership. But if these exercises are achieved, then you just need to have good project managers and trust them and give them freedom of choice. Anytime this is going to happen, you're going to win. If you're not going to win at first, you're going to constantly move on, and sooner or later you're going to win. If you're on the right path, on the right perspective, if you really measure what you're doing in terms of production and productivity and cost reduction, it's just a matter of time. You're going to get there. I don't know if I really addressed the question in a proper way.
You did touch upon some of those points, but I'm gonna come to you, Jeremy, and I know that it's very easy to think of things like frameworks and processes, define KPIs, etc. It's great in theory, but as someone who's been leading these kind of projects in large organizations, you know that there is more to it, and there are more complex obstacles to really overcome, right from stakeholder buy-in, both internal and external, which is starting from the grower, and there are several other players in the entire value chain that you really have to bring on board and get them to buy into the change that you're trying to drive. And then the whole change management itself, which is getting folks to think differently, behave differently, and adopt this change so that it becomes intrinsic to how the business processes themselves have been running or should run as we keep going forward. Would love to hear your experience of how have you tackled some of these obstacles, and you can bring in other aspects also if you want to. It could be project management, it could be around technology, but would love to hear your views as a practitioner leader trying to drive these kind of programs.
Yeah, I think there's whole MBA courses on what you wanted to cover here in this one at the end of the day. But the pitfalls in KPI piece is KPIs can actually lead to some of the pitfalls in this. And what I mean by that, it's the transition. I would say most organizations, like it was probably came out of too many consultant meetings, but like create a startup within your large organization, right? Create this small group that can impact change and drive initiatives forward for digital transformation. And most organizations actually went out the door kind of that way, whether they acquired startups or whether they built them internally. They kind of tried to build this internal little separate digital ecosystem in the large majors, right? That's really kind of their strategy that they went after. And the reason I say this is that you've really got to watch your KPIs on this, because you may have had acreage and usage as your probably top two KPIs to drive that digital ecosystem to get to acres and get to usage. The reality is then you have to eventually make a transition to the large business. And so really one of the key things here is then you're like starting to like, okay, how do you affect EBITDA and what's your return on ROIC and all those things? Because that's what the corporate lingo is that you're reporting to investors. But here you've got these metrics that are usage and acreage. I mean, and then what's your valuation, right? You're burning money in a large organization. What's kind of your valuation? And so what I would encourage others to look at is how do you bring that together? And the change management piece making sure those KPIs are tied to your traditional field sales team's performance management. Like, do they have to get on 1,000 acres and 100 growers in their district and region, and you integrate the tool into their day-to-day life? And Marco, you made a point, I think, out of the gate on time. Time is the only asset that you can't create, right? It is a finite resource. And so if your digital solution and ecosystem is a one-off, it's always a one-off. And if it's not integrated into the larger ecosystem, again, from KPIs or process flow, it will never scale at the scale of a large input. And again, when you look at the large majors, they're on hundreds of millions of acres around the world. Their digital footprint may only be 1 to 10% of that actual larger footprint that they have. And that's what I mean. Like, by itself and compared to another startup, they may be massive, but in the grand scheme of things, they're not. And so you've got to watch that. One of the big things I've seen that's very been beneficial, we at Syngenta Group kind of actually have an internal valuation. How much product is affected, how much product sales is affected by digital solution. In a sense, it's a little bit like how the startups kind of go about their valuations, because causality that the digital product helped the sale is tough to prove in that, because again, it's a relationship-based system. You've got so many touch points. Did that digital tool cause that sale or not? That's hard to prove, but you can get, correlations, right? And that's metrics that we use, like retention, concentration, penetration of customers using digital with customers not using digital. And we always see higher metrics on customers that use digital at the end of the day.
And Jeremy, I just wanted to double click on that aspect before probably coming to a more tactical piece around the technology aspects. One is being able to measure and keep track of this, ensuring that what makes sense to the business and what you probably started as the definition of KPIs for your digital initiatives, etc., and how do you get them to merge and ensure that you're talking one common language that business and all business users understand, so that you can drive that adoption and buy-in. The more critical piece is, are organizations able to truly do this, or this is still a challenge? And have you seen best practices on how this gap can be bridged?
Yeah, I would say you have both in the industry. I don't think this is a standard operating procedure yet. I think you can just see it in the large report outs. Not every company reports digital the same, right? And I mean, Deere, us, everybody will report that digital footprint differently. So this isn't, I think, standardized by any means. But I do think some best practices are showing that correlation and impact, right, across the impact of the organization. So getting into acreage, getting into usage, getting into this valuation piece of what product pull through is for an organization. I think you see that in certain avenues. Some do it better than others. Don't want to pick on anybody here, but it's pretty obvious when you read through the shareholder earnings reports which organizations can report a digital impact and others that can't at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. I'll come to the technology aspect of this, right? As you put together a plan based on the vision and objectives that you define, it could be either transforming a business model or a business process, or an entire value chain or experience of various users in the value chain. It's always this tough question that organizations are trying to answer. Do we build? Do we buy? How do we integrate new technologies that are out there today with existing systems that we already have, processes that have been defined around those systems? Do I rethink those processes completely to be able to truly leverage the technologies and solutions available today? Or do I try and map those solutions to my existing processes? These are all challenges. And if not addressed right, it obviously creates a problem statement around the KPI of ROI and the real impact on business, both top line and bottom line, because it's hard dollars that you're investing behind a project like this one. The second is the smooth transition of of users, right? It could be your internal users or external stakeholders or customers like farmers or growers. And it is an important problem statement to solve. So, Marco, I'll first come to you, right? As someone who's been consulting organizations, how do you think organizations should approach finding answers to these questions? And Jeremy, I would love you to follow up and give your perspective on how you approach this as a leader driving these programs and decisions around these kind of programs.
Yeah, every organization has its own different business model and type of product services according to where it stands on the value chain, serving the farmers or buying from the farmers. So there is no general question, no general answer to that. Everyone should really make an assessment of what they are doing now. What are the opportunities provided by the new digital technologies? What are the competitors likely to be doing? There are newcomers that are entering the sector, so be aware that the ecosystem of agriculture can be completely different in 20 years from now, because we had a lot of continuity in the past years, but digital is disruptive in terms of allowing different way to compete. And so not necessarily the companies that are the winner now and the major player will be in 20 years from now, in 15 years from now. So it's a general recommendation. Look who you are, look what the market wants, and then look at the tools. When looking at the tools, you mentioned buy versus making. Everything started. We are going to talk about digital agriculture since 10 years ago, more or less, in October 2013. Monsanto bought Climate Corporation, and everybody started to talk about this and about this the digital agriculture, and everybody got excited. And I'm happy for that, because there are really opportunities to do good things for the food system. I believe that is the way to go. For a large corporation, it's not really easy to become a digital provider, because this requires a completely different mindset. And so I haven't seen. Maybe Jeremy has more proof on his side, looking from inside, but I haven't seen this approach successful of building in-house, a large corporation that are building in-house successful solution. So I would certainly go, and this is the mainstream. Most of the large corporation, medium corporation, they are looking around and see what are the best solutions that are adopted. So they come along with the development done, the first pilot executed, and ideally a first market penetration in more than a country. And so those can be interesting companies. Then the problem comes to integrating the business model, the different mindset, and also the technology into the internal solution. So I believe that ideally a corporation having done the strategic and positioning exercise will identify the target, the startup target that has the right condition, and there'll certainly be more than one, and ideally moving along with them, and then being very careful into the integration of the people and the business model. Over to you.
Jeremy?
Yeah, no. As you look at least from our vantage point, you look at the buy, build, partner approach. Frankly, we look at it, I would say, as like a portfolio management component, right? And so, what tools do we have already? Systems and technologies, both from the portfolio of services and products we want to offer, but even the portfolio of tech stack behind the scenes, right? So if you get into an evaluation of, say, two startups that have very similar products at the end of the day, but one's in your tech stack and one's not in your tech stack, right? That tends to favor which way you want to go because of the integration costs, assuming technology is on par with each other and there's no significant difference. So again, you start to evaluate, because again, that integration cost is quite high just from the coding standpoint. let alone the people integration standpoint. And so you try to find as much culture fit as possible when you're going that way on either even in a partnership. Maybe it's not an acquisition, right? But it's just even a partnership with an organization. You've got to be on the same pages. I've had experiences in the past where putting into the contract that you must meet every quarter, right, is a highly beneficial component, even on a partnership, because like people just kind of start getting, the blinders on and maybe not, too many Zoom sessions, and just don't get back to like, why are we doing this partnership? What's the benefit to you? What's the benefit to us? Then all of a sudden, 2 years later, when you did a 3-year deal, you're like, people are frustrated, mad, and they're going their own ways. When reality is you could have solved all of that with just a quarterly kind of almost like board meeting, business meeting with you as the major and the startup or whoever you're partnering with. That simple, very, seems minor. I've seen that where that wasn't even called out, like that was a requirement to do. You just kind of thought it would happen. Well, everybody's life gets busy and calendars are booked, and all of a sudden it's 2 years later and you've probably talked twice on the partnership. And so I'd say we really look at it as a portfolio mechanism. Again, where do we have overlap? Where do we have gaps on any of those? And then it gets into, should we buy, should we build, should we partner on those technology stacks? And then, you talk about customer transaction or transition. Syngenta, and like you mentioned, Marco, most of the all majors have acquired somebody over the years. Here at Syngenta Group, we had acquired quite a few, but 2 large ones, one out of Brazil, one out of the Ukraine market. And again, integration of those teams into your larger teams. What I will say over the years where I've seen success is when you blend the management teams, whether that's the product team, the engineering team, or the leadership team, I don't care. But if you go all with one versus or all the others, so all the ag input, say it's all his legacy Syngenta Group people to drive product or to drive engineering or to drive leadership, or if you see all the startup driving engineering or driving product, like you get into too much culture clash. And you really need that blended leadership, part, startup and part legacy leadership team, because you've got to merge the cultures. Otherwise, you're going to end up with way too much conflict of people getting focused on the way to the outcome versus the outcome itself, right? This was my way to get there. I'm going to do it this way. I don't care what you say. Like that, you get into too much of that stuff. Instead of our outcome is to improve the grower or our route to market, our customer with this product and this solution and integrate it into the business. Like if you don't blend those leadership teams and teams, it's not just the leadership team, it's the teams. You get people hung up on this ways to the outcome instead of the outcome that they're trying to deliver.
Awesome. I know we are pretty much at time. Love those insights, Jeremy and Marco. And thank you for sharing your perspectives on enabling large-scale digital transformation programs. And what we learned today is that successful implementation of these programs really require a thoughtful approach to planning, execution, and change management. By rethinking their business models and embracing digital technologies, businesses and organizations in the agriculture industry can truly unlock significant value. It could be improving efficiency or driving sustainable growth with their grower communities at the core of the center. Now, as we move forward, we will continue to explore and adopt innovative solutions that will fuel the future of agriculture. And I know that we all have a lot to really consume and make sense of as we keep making this journey and transition. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to further discussions on this critical topic and connected topics as we continue to look at future episodes of Ag-celerate with Cropin. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sujit and Jeremy.
Thank you, guys. Good to connect.